The state of Florida sees a massive increase in overdose deaths, but it's not the entire state of Florida. Overall, the state is starting to trend downward, but there are particular counties in the state of Florida that are seeing an explosion of drug overdoses at a rate they've never seen before. Some of these counties have never been above the state average, and now they're seeing an extreme surge of overdoses. Currently, the state of Florida's overdose death rate is 37 people per every 100,000, which is considerably higher than a state like California at 26. The state of Texas only has 16 per 100,000. And the state of New York is at about 28 per 100,000, so the state of Florida is the only large population state that's currently stuck in a drug overdose crisis. All the states dealing with the worst overdose rates have small populations, places like Maine or West Virginia. There's a lot we can learn about Florida's future by today's video. Let us start with Collier County, the area surrounding Naples. This particular county only has an overdose death rate above the state average during a recession. During 2007 and 2009, when people were losing houses and there was a lot of economical strain on the area, Collier County's overdose death rate was above the state average. Interestingly enough, for the first time since, Collier County's overdose death rate is now above the state average. This could very well indicate that we are about to enter an economic downturn. An interesting thing about the Naples area, it is usually safer than the state average. However, during economic hardship, this area tends to go above the state average with crime, as well as overdose death rates, which is what I've told a lot of people moving to Florida. Things may be great now, but when there's an economic downturn, the state of Florida is affected disproportionately. And we saw that with Southwest Florida being hit the second hardest during the last recession. Only Las Vegas, Nevada was a more vulnerable real estate market. It's really a place of feast or famine, but overall Collier County's overdose death rate didn't really increase dramatically. Collier's overdose death rate is now 39 per 100,000 above the state average, coming up from 34 per 100,000, just below the state average. Gilchrist County is a rural area just to the west of Gainesville. Gilchrist County is completely off the charts with their overdose death rate. An area that usually has below state average is now seeing overdose death rates climbing at an unbelievable scale. Even more concerning is that Gilchrist County during 2007 and 2008 had the same increase as Collier County, good economical indicators of something very nasty brewing in Florida's economical future. Collier County and St. Johns County have always been competing to be the best in Florida. Both counties have the highest income, the lowest crime rates. These two counties have always been competing to be the best two counties in Florida. And we're not talking about somebody's opinion. We're talking about analytically, St. Johns County and Collier County have always been in a competition to be the best in Florida. But right now, the Naples area's drug overdose death rate is almost 2 times higher than St. Johns County. We're starting to see a distinction between these two counties, and for the first time ever, St. Johns County is starting to look like the best county to live in Florida. Glades County is a rural community in south central Florida. Glades County's overdose death rate is now 66 per 100,000, coming up from 34, almost a 50% increase in their overdose death rate. How a small rural community could just have a massive explosion of overdose deaths from one year to the next is hard to comprehend. This county just went from below state average to almost the worst in the state from one year to the next. Right next door to Glades County is Okeechobee, and their overdose rate increased from 43 to 52. So we're starting to see that South Central Florida having a huge uptick of drug overdoses around the Lake Okeechobee area. Over the last 4 years, Okeechobee has seen its overdose death rate double. Sumter County, which is right outside of the Villages, a county known for an elderly population and being a retirement place for those looking for affordability, is now also outpacing the state average. This is a county that's always bragged about having a very low homeless population, but with this increase in overdose deaths, we can assume that their homeless population is about to explode as well. And back on the East Coast, Flagler County also had a tremendous overdose death rate increase. They were at around 30 below the state average, and they are now seeing rates near 47 per 100,000, an incredible increase. This almost reminds me of COVID, where areas that were not initially affected the worst at some point or another had a spike before things came back down. And I hope it's just a temporary spike for these counties and that they don't continue this dangerous trend they're starting. Broward County, Florida, which is the Fort Lauderdale area, seems to perfectly mirror the state of Florida, and it is pretty much the most average county in Florida, which always seems to be at about the state average. We've seen this correlation with Broward County more than once going over analytics. It seems like if you want to live in the most average place in Florida, the Fort Lauderdale area is about it. The worst overdose death rate in Florida is Escambia County, which is the Pensacola area. This is the most northwestern county in the state of Florida, and currently its overdose death rate is near 75 per 100,000. Likely a contributing factor, Pensacola is the most western large city in Florida, and the adjacent states have stricter drug laws as well as horrendous prisons. These states have the worst prison systems in the country, so it makes sense that people who are addicted are going to flee Louisiana, flee Mississippi, flee Alabama, and come to Florida. Adjacent to Okaloosa County is also having a huge problem keeping their OD rates down. Now this county is up to 54 per 100,000. It was 41 the previous year, and we're talking about a county that has never been above the state average, but now they're seeing an explosion of overdoses. But now the Pensacola area has the highest overdose death rate in the entire state of Florida. Before them was Citrus County. Citrus County was up to 83 per 100,000. Thankfully, it's dropped down to 55 per 100,000, so Citrus County is no longer the worst drugged out county in Florida. This US 19 corridor from Pinellas County, Hernando, and all the way up to Citrus and Marion has had some of the highest overdose death rates in the entire state of Florida for many years now. Overall, the lowest region in Florida for overdoses is the rural African American communities around Leon County. That's the Tallahassee area. This area continues to be the lowest drug overdose area in the entire state of Florida, with Madison County being the lowest in the entire state at only 3 per 100,000, while the white rural counties are definitely struggling. Economically, this region of the state isn't much. None of these counties are economically significant, but they're able to keep a low drug overdose death rate, and it mostly stems from having a large African American population, which isn't being affected like the rural white population. Usually, rural black communities are dealing with homicide rates, incarceration rates, and other ailments that affect that community, but in the case of drug overdose, it doesn't affect their community as much. As far as large cities go, Miami is the lowest for large cities at around 11 per 100,000. Miami really is a prime example of a large metropolitan area that isn't affected by the plague of drug overdoses. But then again, you also don't have a large white population. Dade County is now about 70% Hispanic, and again, the Hispanic community is not affected like the white population. Before we end today's video, I want to show you guys a little piece of information that I found interesting. The Lee County Sheriff has said that since he became sheriff in 2018, Lee County, Florida has seen an incredible reduction in crime. In particular, he says that Lee County, Florida is to thank their narcotics team for ensuring that Lee County, Florida has had year after year a reduction in crime. He's really doing a great job, isn't he? That is actually until you look at the analytics. Governor Rick Scott made Marcino the sheriff of Lee County in 2018. Now, before that, since 2016, you had seen a jump in Lee County's overdose death rate. The problem is that it's continued to be above the state average, and as you can see from the chart that I drew for you guys, Lee County's overdose death rate has been significantly above the state average. And the time that he's been sheriff, Lee County has actually had above state average overdose death rates, considerably above state average, being the only county in Southwest Florida that really sticks out like a sore thumb. Now it is actually even worse than Sarasota and Manatee counties, if you can wrap your head around that. The reason I'm pointing this out to you is because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. Unfortunately, we don't expect misinformation to be coming from a sheriff's office, but that's where it's coming from right now. And I'm mentioning this to you because I have a lot of people that are moving to Florida, and they're telling me that they've heard so many great things that this guy boasts about himself and what a great job he's doing in Lee County, Florida. But Lee County, Florida is actually the worst in Southwest Florida right now, worse than Sarasota and Bradenton, if you can even wrap your head around that. Now, on the real estate side, Lee County continues to be a very strong player in the luxury real estate market, but the schools in Lee County are in bad shape. The overdose drug death rates in Lee County are completely out of control. Homelessness is shooting out of control. Lee County is starting to look like something outside of Tampa more than something in Southwest Florida. It's really a shame how bad Lee County's got in the aspect of schools, in the aspect of overdoses. The situation in Lee County, Florida is truly pathetic, yet the spokesperson for the county is making it seem like everything is right. And again, the only reason I'm sharing this information with you is in case you are moving to Florida, that you understand that a lot of times there's individuals out there like him that are making these statements, trying to make everything look like it's perfect in their counties, when in reality, the county is struggling. It's in a horrible condition. So you can't really believe everything you hear despite the source seeming to be a great source of information. You would expect this to be a good source of information, but it's not. The reality is you have to be on the ground like I am, looking at these counties, comparing them to one another. And sadly, Lee County, Florida, the Fort Myers area, is really gone down the drain. I mean, Collier County, the Naples area, is now above the state average. So if the hub county of wealth and commerce is starting to be above state average, what do you think is going to happen to Lee County, a commuter community into Naples? I hate to say it, but Southwest Florida's reign of being the safest, most crime-free area of Florida is quickly coming to an end. There's a lot of conclusions that we could draw about these analytics, and why some areas have a higher percentage, while some areas have a lower percentage. Areas that have a larger commute seem to have higher drug overdose death rates. But overall, we can say that areas with large Black or Hispanic populations are not suffering the same overdose death rates, and it's predominantly poor rural white Florida and suburban areas that commute that are having the worst problem.